Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are trying out Dagon. It's an eldritch horror game, HP Lovecraft. I think, let me just reconfirm. Yeah, it is free on Steam if you want to check it out. Well, the first one is if you want to check out the DLCs, those cost a little bit. But yeah, I saw that this is meant to be a short game, so we're gonna check it out today. Alrighty, let's check this out. I have not seen anything from this game. If I did, I don't really remember. I have a terrible memory generally, so this should be fun. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
Well, during this game, you will encounter attractive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find their secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder sign. Okay. Can we move?
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Oof. Can I move at all?
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Oh, we could have zoomed. Could we get up? Oh. Morphine. Morphine entered into the use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and World War I, 1914 and 1918. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Wow. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Hendrik Sturturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. Alright, you can read the discovered trivia immediately or go back to them later. Main menu. Turn off display trivia if you find that the feature distracts you from the story. It can be changed anytime in the options. Okay, that's nice.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
So we can't really move. Hang on. I do want to change the audio a little bit so that we can hear him talk a little more. Okay, so we have that. We can't really turn further. Oh. Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner? Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Letters to Reinhard Kleiner, H.P. Lovecraft. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence, the life and times of H.P. Lovecraft, S.T. Joshi. Interesting. So I can barely look around, actually. So it's just this. What's that gunshot?
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation.
Can I turn more? No, I'm limited to this. I can turn.
So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Aha. It is beautiful. The HUNS. The HUNS were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids, who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on the 27th July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899. Wow.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Is there an Eldritch sign anywhere? No.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars, that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
That is quite freaky.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
Guys hearing that? Ah, there's an elder sign. The Return to Short Stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduced an element from the Cthulhu mythos, Dagon itself. A pagan cult worshipping Dagon later appears in Shadows over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a story about Gervas Dudley, a daydreamer who discovers a mysterious mausoleum in the woods by his house and becomes obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short stories, writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Lovecraft stated that it was his friend, William Paul Cook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
I can't turn.
The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Whoa! Oh, my lord. Oh my gosh. Uh-huh. Do I see an elder sun anywhere? Nope. If you guys do see me missing elder signs, do let me know. I'd be really happy to know so I could go back and play this over.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see.
What is undulations?
And in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
I would be too.
For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain.
Can we zoom now? I gotta say, the scene itself is horrifying yet beautiful.
Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity.
I guess I could see what you're talking about, but I don't see it being hideous. Yeah, actually I could in a deeper sense.
There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
Hello.
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
The origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and a strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down in defense of Dagon. H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. Dweller in Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927. Donald Wandre. You know, that actually makes sense. The fact that he hates it, that he has an aversion to it, that's how he depicts everything so disturbingly around those elements. Because I love seafood. I could eat seafood every day. I don't have an aversion to it. I don't know what else to say. I just don't. I do have to a degree, a fear of the sea, the unknown. I'm a weak swimmer. I am afraid of being pulled down and dying, and the fact that it's quite powerful, the whole mystery of the ocean, mystery of the sea, mother nature and all that, it's terrifying as an element, as a force of nature. But I can see how this deep fear of his turned everything. Like, it colors his books now. More clearly, anyway.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented
What is
volcanic
that?
upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
That could explain it, yeah.
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
The mystery of volcanic islands. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice, porous rock created when superheated pressured rock is ejected from a volcano, can move across long distances and transport barnacles and macroalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. Wow, okay. That's interesting.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
What kind of creatures? If there is an elder sign, I don't see it. Is it a crab? Is it a squid? I know that might be a whale.
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
There is it. There it is. The horrors of the ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu mythos and the fictional underwater city of R'lyeh was convinced that that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today we knew that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Marinara sea snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet, below the ocean surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellish crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the normal photos of deep-sea creatures, such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this. Makes sense.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
Seriously? That quickly?
Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Well, I can't turn any other way, so...
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine.
I can't move.
I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
I don't think there be? Nope.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
Gosh, I really love how this looks. There are a few games like this, by the way, if you're interested. I will link the ones that I've played into a Lovecraft playlist, or I'll add the Lovecraft's games I've played into a playlist for you, and I'll link it below. A couple of them is called Desolatium, I believe.
For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith.
Desolatium, I think, is still in beta. No, sorry, still as a demo, both of them. But it's similar to this. Story-based, you look around. But this is actually more story than the other one was. That one you actually had to action and do things. Here you just look around and click on things. This one is more of a walking sim without the walking part. What would you call that? A looking sim? It still has a similar atmosphere to this first person creepy undertones. That one, the two, had a more interesting aesthetic though. The way it was drawn out looks beautiful. I'm not saying this doesn't look beautiful, but it's quite similar to this. Also Lovecraft, obviously.
Whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Whoa.
Now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm. And revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
Oh, I think I pressed too hard. Missed one of the comments. Let's see. We missed one of the comments. One of the...
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books. Consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, the Shadow, Out of Time, the Haunter of the Dark, Islands Emerging from the Ocean, the Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo and the Whisperer in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. Thank you, I appreciate that. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful Cthulhu right there. And that's an alligator. Or a crocodile, whichever. Sharks.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
Wow.
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
Oh, wow.
I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
The Piltdown man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as inspiration for his works. He would even update his stories at the last moment in order to make sure they reflected the latest breakthroughs. Unfortunately, this method was not without its flaws. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned out to be a paleoanthropological fraud. In 1912, Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. Years later, they turned out to be a forgery, but by that point, the fraud had already managed to negatively affect the early research on human evolution. In the year when the discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. In 1953, the Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of the previously unknown early human consisted of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and a chimpanzee's teeth.
Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Whoa.
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Oh my god.
Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital,
How?
brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Okay, we got 2 here. The journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again. For the first time since his teenage years, Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against the unarmed victims. No country is or ever can be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. In defense of Dagon, in 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays, The Defense Reopens, The Defense Remains Open, and Final Words, later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticisms directed at his works. Some notable quotes: "I paint what I dream, and will let the public settle the rest amongst themselves. Mr. Monday asked the raison d'etre on Dagon. I will give it, purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities. In the essays, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and the love of science.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist.
An ethnologist.
And amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
There is an eldritch sign on the carpet, or I could be wrong. It's just embroidery. Okay, that's just that. Dagon, or Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with his fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
A Necronomicon! It's right there! Ooh, and this one as well? Okay. Where are we meant to be clicking though afterwards? Back there. Okay. I like that this one we can do a 360. So let's just start with this one here. The Marketer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from his friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine, where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and crafted with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and trademark on the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Wow. August DERLETH and the Cthulhu Mythos. August DERLETH was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. DERLETH was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misinterpreted in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by DERLETH after the author left the mortal plane. Interesting. The scientist. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in a story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted in the defense of Dagon that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet, in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be published by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Fascinating. I did not know a lot of these things, so this is actually beautifully webbed into the story.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence, his friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated 13th Feb 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to. Having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Equipoise. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition. The prohibition of anyone antisocial force as well as any other. Source: Spirit of Revision, Lovecraft's Letters to Zelia Brown, Reed Bishop, H.P. Lovecraft, Sean Brannery, Andrew Lehman, S.T. Joshi.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
Dear Lord.
The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Can I move further? It's literally...
It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Can I? Because I missed out on that one. Well. Wow. Wow. Thank you for playing. We hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in our little pool of cosmic horror. We'd appreciate it if you took a moment to rate Dagon and check out our other games and DLCs. Okay. Yeah, there are a couple of DLCs of this. 3 that I see. I think the third one is not yet out. But yeah, I actually really like this one. This was quite immersive. If you guys like this to be a small series, I will get the DLCs. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. I will be putting a playlist of all the other Lovecraft games I have played. Well done, devs. This was quite entertaining. There was a lot of information, trivia that I actually never knew about H.P. Lovecraft, and I look forward to seeing more from this dev. Thank you, everybody, and see you guys next time. Bye!